which means he then has the inside line for turn 6. But this is the genius part, this is the clever part. The inside line in turn 6 meant he can put Hamilton wide at the entry and mid-corner for turn 6, which is exactly what he did, and that's how he got the position. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Apex to Apex podcast with your host, me, Stanley Jones, where we discuss all things Formula 1 and MotoGP. Now of course we've just had a double header weekend that's just passed, and before we head into the Silverstone weekend for Formula 1 coming up, because there's no MotoGP this weekend, we'll be discussing the events of the past weekend where MotoGP were at Assen and Formula 1 were at Austria. Could be a long episode this time because there's quite a lot of things to talk about over the weekend. Of course, MotoGP had the 2 races, Saturday sprint race where quite a few things happened, and the Sunday main race, followed by the Formula 1 weekend, which was controversial in its own sense in the qualifying before going into the race on Sunday. But let's start with MotoGP. Now, again, everyone who's watched this podcast before should know if I look at my phone, it's because I've got my little app I made for the little teleprompter thing. If I'm looking at the screens, I've got my face on this screen and I've some highlights on the sprint race and the races in front of me. So I recall everything that happened, but let's go straight into Assen, where we will be praising Trackhouse Aprilia, who secured a 1-2 not only on the Saturday sprint race, but also on the Sunday main race. It was Ralf Fernandez superbly won the sprint race in front of Ogura on the Saturday, and then Ogura finally got his first race win on the Sunday ahead of Ralf Fernandez, and they were frankly superb throughout the entire weekend, the Trackhouse boys. It was very obvious it's going to be Aprilia being favourites. After qualifying on Saturday morning, the first 4 positions on the grid were Aprilia. Bear in mind, this was the first race weekend where they've banned the front hole shot devices, so the bikes they no longer have to push the front forks down at the start. They did it for safety reasons. It was actually entertaining to watch which riders could control the wheelie better, because all the power of the rear device is still there, so all the power is coming from the rear tyre, shooting the bike in the air. And I think it actually made for better starts, in my opinion, less lunatics going into turn 1. They still have to be brave on the brakes, of course they do, but it's more controlled now going into turn 1, so I agree with the move. I know Márquez didn't initially, but he said it felt safer and better, so I think they all kind of agreed after the first, and they did the full start on the Saturday sprint race. But yes, this really was a breakthrough weekend for Trackhouse and Ogura himself. Fernandez is already a previous race winner, so he's tasted it before, but it was finally the weekend where Ogura managed to put everything together in terms of qualifying, in terms of racecraft and overtakes. He had some very good overtakes, especially on the Sunday and the Saturday, actually, not just on the Sunday, into the final chicane on the likes of Di Antonio and the likes of Martin. There was one in the sprint race where Martin got him midway through the lap, and then Ogura came past him into his final chicane down the inside. Perfect move from him, perfect from Trackhouse itself, as I said. And are they, I thought they're a front-running team now. Well, they kind of are a front-running team, because they've been up there consistently the last few race weekends now, haven't they? And the only difference is this time they're able to put it forward and actually do that step to win the Grand Prix. It's odd how Ogura is going to be going to Yamaha, or rumoured to be going to Yamaha next year. That's the interesting one. We don't know what Yamaha will be like on the 850. Speaking of Yamaha, Fabio Quartararo and Alex Rins have announced they are leaving Yamaha at the end of this season. We'll speak about that a little bit later on and what the rumours are with those two. But Ogura will be one of them, or projected to be one of them, to replace them in the factory Yamaha team from 2027 onwards. I really hope it's a good move for Ogura. I really hope it is, purely because he needs it to be a good move. Yamaha's a risk, complete risk at all. For Quartararo side his career to Yamaha, and look what's happened to him, so Ogura I hope isn't doing the same thing. And Ralf Fernandez, for his sake, I hope he stays at Trackhouse. There's not a lot of rumours going around about Ralf Fernandez, but I think he's just kind of secured that deal now by putting in winning the sprint race, putting that performance, and then coming second on the Sunday. And the biggest statement really is the fact that Trackhouse managed to beat the factory Aprilia team throughout the weekend. It was kind of mixed in qualifying, but Saturday's sprint race and Sundays, the factory Aprilia boys, so Jorge Martin, Marco Bezzecchi, championship leader, no longer championship leader now, as actually after the results, Jorge Martin lead the championship. But the factory Aprilia boys made so many mistakes on the Saturday sprint and the Sunday race, they gave points away. You might think, what happened to Bezzecchi? He didn't crash on the Saturday sprint, but the Aprilia boys were trying to take each other out intensely on the Saturday. Fast forward to the Sunday, and then you see Marco Bezzecchi dropped it on lap 2 at the corner, the left-hander towards the last left-hander really away from the chicane at the end of the track at Assen. It's a corner's 130 mile an hour corner. You don't want to drop it there. He did while following Márquez quite fast. He had quite a tumble over the gravel. He is okay, but it looked very painful. But it's another mistake from Bezzecchi. And I said a few weeks ago, the pressure's going to pile up now, especially because Márquez is starting to hunt them, and Bezzecchi's not responded anywhere near well enough to that pressure, and yet again he tasted the dirt, and yet again he tasted it at a fast corner. But one thing that has to be said is Ogura. I was happy for Ogura, purely because he deserved that race win. He's been one of the star ones this season, really, especially the last 5-6 races where everyone, I think, is rooting for him. I love how Ogura doesn't really celebrate. He's very calm. and he crossed the line. He did the fist bumps. He celebrated. And there's a great video of Raul Fernandez jumping on the bike with the team, shouting, celebrating up and down. And the camera just pans to Ogura, who's saying to the photographer, "Can you just take the picture and we can leave?" Which cracked me up. I found that hilarious. But let's focus on Bezzecchi real quick, because Bezzecchi, the pressure of being the championship leader was really laid bare this weekend. It's been coming to the front for Bezzecchi's face, really. Of course, those who remember, in Brno, he didn't actually race the Sunday race because he was banned after slapping a marshal. So the frustration's really getting to him. He had a close duel with his teammate Martin on the Saturday sprint, and that duel really, I can't remember what corner it was. One of the right-handers went into the lap where they came really close. Martin went down the inside of Bezzecchi. No, sorry, the other way around. Bezzecchi went down the inside of Martin. Martin, you thought he's going to back away, but then Bezzecchi kind of went. So Martin went down the inside of the next corner quite aggressively. If they liked each other in the team, like Martin wouldn't have gone for that reply overtaking the right-hander, but he did. Bezzecchi at the same time, interestingly enough, read it and allowed himself to go wide on the entry to have that tighter exit line. And they got to a point where they were both meeting at the same point at the tarmac, and Bezzecchi made Martin not only stand the bike up, but stand the bike up at high speed and go off the track, off over the curb, did a little run-off bit at this particular corner to stay on the bike once he stood it up. And that was a very aggressive move to do on your teammate. But the weird thing is, this is followed by a move Bezzecchi tried on Martin earlier on in the lap, or maybe about a lap before, into turn 1, where Bezzecchi had the run out the last chicane. He had the perfect run on the main straight. He's pulled alongside Martin, and as he hit the brakes for turn 1, any other situation, if it wasn't your teammate, Bezzecchi goes down the inside. It's an easy move to do at this point. And then suddenly you see Martin go around the outside of him, and there was that was very, very weak from Bezzecchi into that corner. And maybe that frustrated him, the fact that he allowed that weakness to happen. And I didn't understand why he didn't make the move done. It didn't really look good on Bezzecchi. Fast forward later on, you had this incident with the two Aprilias. I say instant, they didn't come together, but it could have been, and it was very close, and they were trying to. But for the first time this season, because of his crash on lap 2, Marco Bezzecchi does no longer lead the championship standings. His teammate Jorge Martin now leads the standings, which I think will anger Aprilia, because Martin hates Aprilia hate Martin, Bezzecchi hates Martin hates Bezzecchi. And now the Aprilia leading the standings is Jorge Martin, who's again on his way, like Ogura, on his way to Yamaha allegedly next season. So he knows he's not going to beat Aprilia, and that's not the Aprilia they want leading. And it's fascinating to me how they've allowed it to happen, and how Bezzecchi's allowed it to happen with these mistakes that are creeping into him every session now, every important session. It was a fascinating crash to watch. Some people ask me how the crash has happened for Bezzecchi, and it's purely because the way this long left-hander goes, he's that close to Márquez. He's trying to line him up for the chicane, the next corner where you lean right. And they're leaning left, almost full lean left, as 130 miles an hour. This is 4th gear. So as soon as to make the move into chicane when you're following on for this left-hander, you go on the throttle earlier to go, except you're going wider on the exit, but that in turn turns into the inside line effectively for the chicane coming up. So it seems to me that Bezzecchi's just gone on the throttle while he's still leaning, but he's done that little bit too much lean angle. Maybe you could say too desperate to make the move too early, or pushing just too much too early. And the front slipped from him, and as I said, it's a fast crash over the gravel. His body actually reached the barrier, the wall. Thankfully, he didn't hit it that hard, and he has had a scan. He is okay, but it's not all comfortable right now. If you're Marco Bezzecchi, he's let the pressure get to him, and now he's lost that lead. And now I keep saying he needs to respond for the next race, and he's yet to actually show that he can respond. And that's what we're all waiting for. Before we actually talk about the other riders and teams like Ducati, there's a bit to speak about with Ducati, with Márquez, Bagnaia, and the announcement of Pedro Acosta. The main focus this weekend was Aprilia, because when the factory boys were scrapping against each other, especially in the Saturday sprint race, it allowed the Trackhouse boys and Fabio Di Giannantonio, who I'll admit was very impressive over the weekend, of the Ducati that wasn't quite working around the Assen circuit. Di Giannantonio was competitive on both days. Sunday, not as much at the front. It was in his own battle because he had a bad start and then a long lap for shoving Márquez on the gravel. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the Aprilia boys were spending so much time tripping over themselves, they could even close the gap to the Trackhouse boys. Now, again, the Trackhouse boys are on Aprilias, and I don't think it was a good look for the factory Aprilia boys to be caught in their own battle, almost sacrificing a lead. Now, if we will talk about the Ducati boys, because of course we have to mention Marc Márquez, who remains 40 points behind on the stand. He's dropped down a position, I think, now in the championship, but he's actually held the gap of 40 points because of what's happened with Bezzecchi and Martin. And of course, Martin now leaving. I think Martin's about 16, 15 points clear of Bezzecchi, that is. But Di Giannantonio is 20 something points off. Ogura is now only 25 points off. And then you got Marc Márquez 40 points behind. Now, Márquez finished 6th in the sprint race because he got promoted due to Pecco Bagnaia's penalty, which demoted him to 7th. And then on the Sunday race, I believe he was 7th while Bagnaia retired due to a technical fault. But Márquez has got, you could see the back-to-back races are taking a toll on him now with his fitness levels. And his goal really was to come out of the weekend and avoid injury. And he's managed to do that while keeping the lead at 40 points. The gap, at 40 points. And you have to question that really, Aprilia must be annoyed at that, because this was their opportunity this weekend to halt the Márquez momentum, which they have done, Trackhouse more than factory, but they still didn't build the gap to him. And the gap is still actually only going to come shorter and shorter. Bear in mind the next race weekend for MotoGP in a couple of weeks is Sachsenring. Now Sachsenring, if anyone who knows MotoGP, I think Márquez won their 11 races in a row, and it's mostly left-handers. Make of that what you will. But it did look like it was one of those weekends, the first time since he's had that other surgery, where the toll had taken an effect now on his right shoulder, and he seemed to struggle with the physicality of the track, of the bike. He needed, I think, that week gap in between the races, and back-to-back was a bit too strenuous. But adding on to that, the Ducati clearly wasn't working as well as they wanted it to, apart from Di Giannantonio. But again, Di Giannantonio found himself scrapping with Márquez on the Sunday itself, despite his Saturday performance. But the priority for Marc Márquez was to avoid, or to come out of the weekend and avoid further injury, which, as I said, is exactly what he did. There's a few highlights from Marc's race, especially on the Saturday. There was a clip where I think it was lap 3, Pecco Bagnaia. There's a great camera where the camera on the rear of the bike follows the guy behind as they come out of turn 4 into the hairpin at turn 5. And you see when they're close enough to make a move and dive left, and they dart to the right of the camera. Pecco Bagnaia did that to Marc Márquez on lap 3 of the sprint race. Márquez then refused to give up the position, stayed alongside side by side with his teammate down this back straight after turn 5 and 6 into the fast turn 7, which is going to be like a 160 mile an hour corner. Down the inside of Pecco Bagnaia he went, and he kept the position, which at the time was for 6th and 7th. What was funny to me is you could kind of see Márquez, he didn't want to race them. I think he was quite actually content to be 5th, 6th, 7th around, and he didn't want to race the ones in front of him. But because they were fighting each other so hard and making mistakes, it left the door open for Márquez to make a move. Lap 2, for example, in the Sunday race, the Trackhouse boys went into turn 1, and I think it was Fernandez on the inside of Ogura, and it was deep, and they both kind of ran one little bit on turn 1, which left the door open for Marc Márquez in turn 2 to go down the inside of both of them. So they went into this turn 2, 3 wide. Marc's gone down the inside of Fernandez, who's undercut Marc on the exit of turn 2 into turn 3, which is perfect from Fernandez. But it's a perfect move for Márquez. Fernandez had to make the undercut, which meant Ogura had to stand the bike up. Ogura in turn lost the position to Bezzecchi and then got it back in turn 4. Fernandez and Marc went side by side until turn 5, when Fernandez went down the inside of Márquez at turn 5. And I was laughing purely because I think Marc's thinking, I don't really want to fight you lot. What are you doing? Just make the gap and let me stay in this position. I can't fight you lot this weekend. But they kept giving him the opportunity to. Bezzecchi crashed and relieved some ease on Marc's shoulders, because that's one rival gone. He didn't get slaughtered by, again, the Aprilias, Martin, Di Giannantonio. A weird overtake with Di Giannantonio. We'll get into that in a bit. He was fighting Acosta before. Acosta broke down, actually, I take it back. Broke down multiple times throughout the weekend. But his retirement on Sunday, again, another retirement for Acosta on a Sunday. This wasn't because of a reliability fault, like normally is like the last few rounds. He actually pulled out of the race on the Sunday because he's had a problem with his right hand, which I didn't know, where at some point in the race he loses feeling in his right thumb, his right index, his right middle finger. And of course, he said it got that bad on lap 2 at Assen. He couldn't even feel where the brake lever was, or how much pressure he's putting on the brake lever. I believe he's having surgery for that early this week. Something carpal, something here on your arm. If you've got the video version on YouTube, you can see 1.2 on your arm. I don't know what it is. I'm not a surgeon or a doctor. Somewhere in the arm that makes your hand go numb. And when your hand's numb, Acosta couldn't feel the brake lever, so he actually pulled out of the race. Which again sums up Acosta's luck. We'll get into this a little bit again later on, but it sums up Acosta's luck. But if we focus on the fight that Márquez was having so far, there was one with Acosta on the Sunday where Acosta again went down the inside of Márquez, turn 5. Márquez didn't do the same line as Bagnaia this time. He let Acosta down the inside to get him back on the exit. And you have to remember, next year, with the Pedro Acosta announcement that he will be a factory Ducati rider next season alongside Marc Márquez, there's going to be a bit of needle there between the king and the upcoming king. Márquez, just like he did Bagnaia, got in the slipstream. Instead of being side by side, he did it late in the inside of turn 7, again 160, 70 mile an hour, whatever this corner is. Got Pedro Acosta straight back at this fast corner, kind of putting a stamp on the fight between them. And for me, this is very exciting, the fact they've announced Acosta at Ducati. Of course, Pecco Bagnaia is going Aprilia, as we all know. All the rumours and the worst kept secrets are now coming out. Bagnaia to Aprilia, Acosta to Ducati confirmed. But now every time these two are going to race each other, there's going to be that needle because of next season's trajectory. So yeah, Marc went down the inside of Acosta at turn 7, got his place back. And Acosta, there's 3 or 4 laps where Acosta would send it down the inside of Marc at turn 1. It's stunning racing on these bikes, which are hard to overtake anyway. Acosta at one point did it again, but ran wide, actually leaving the gap for Marc to get by him, and Pecco Bagnaia passed him as well before he dropped out of the race. That was Acosta's race done, but him and Marc were really putting on a show in turn 1, and at the end of the lap, Marc would get him back, and then turn 1 again, Acosta would come back. but it had to a point where he did it just too far on the brakes, went wide at turn 1, and then both Ducati Reds would pass Pedro Acosta, as I said, before he backed out of the race. But I will say, the one way he went wide, he was never making a corner. That's why I love Acosta, because him and Márquez are the same bit of cloth. Acosta was never making that corner, but he still sent down into the lane, just in that off chance he could make the corner. Didn't work, and again, we know what happens. Pecco Bagnaia then proceeded to overtake Márquez and have a scrap with him again before Bagnaia drops out of the race. So Mark was fortunate with people dropping out of the race, but at the same time didn't have the pace. And in the end, was actually beat by his brother Alex Márquez, who, to me, was warrior of the whole weekend. He had a big crash on Friday, landed straight in his shoulder, and his glove cut off. He had his whole arm and his whole hand cut up to pieces. Now remember, Alex Márquez recovering from the broken collarbone and the bone in his back, and just cuts and bruises and broken things galore, and finished 5th, which is incredible, absolutely incredible by Alex Márquez. Just staying on Mark's race for a second now before we focus on the actual fight at the front and what happened. Mark, it was 4th, and Alex Márquez got in because he fell into the battle of Alex Márquez, Di Giannantonio, and Enea Bastianini, who managed to catch the group. Di Giannantonio, I've said before, has this weird way of racing Marc Márquez, where I feel like he has this need to prove a point. And he's always aggressive against Mark, which is fine, it's racing, but I think the first move he tried on Márquez in Assen was slightly over the line. Bear in mind, if we put our minds back to round 1 of the MotoGP season this season, Márquez went down the inside of Acosta. There was a little contact on the knees, and Acosta stood up, and Márquez had to give the place back and in turn lost the sprint race. But if we focus now on this move, Di Giannantonio went down the inside of Márquez, a big lunge at this final chicane at Assen. Missed the corner, and him and Mark touched. And Mark, well, I say it was a slight touch, but Mark had to pick the bike up and cut across the gravel. Now, if you remember 2015, Mark is on the inside and Valentino Rossi on the outside. It was the other way around now. It was Mark on the outside having to cut through the gravel trap. Di Giannantonio would get a long lap penalty, but not for the contact. He got the long lap because Di Giannantonio also didn't make the corner and cut through the blue painted runoff. That's why he got the long lap. So when he got the long lap, he fell back in between. I think it was Mark and Bastianini because Alex was now in front of them all. But the decisions like that are the ones that are remembered by the riders, especially what happened in round 1, Márquez and Acosta. Now you got Mark getting pushed wide, and he was pushed wide. You can't really deny he wasn't pushed wide. He was clearly pushed wide, but the long lap was for going along the circuit in the painted runoff, not for the contact, which is interesting. And again, it's Di Giannantonio being aggressive against Mark. Even Alex Márquez warned, this is interesting, Alex Márquez warned, if you're going to be a boomerang on track, expect it to come back. If Mark's fully fit and competing for a win, he will give it back to Di Giannantonio harder than Di Giannantonio has ever felt before in his life. Alas, when he came back on track after the long lap, as I said, he came out in between Mark and Bastianini. He then did the same move on Mark at the same corner, the same chicane. A bit closer in, but he made sure to stay on the track. He's still aggressive on Mark. Mark also ensured he stayed on the track, and they nearly actually came together at the left, a little flip-flop bit of the chicane, because of how hard Mark was trying to keep on track. As I said, Mark didn't really want to race him. He was accepting what was happening, which is odd to see Mark doing that, but when you're in the physical limitation he's in at the minute of that shoulder, it wasn't a surprise at all, and I thought it was actually very smart of him to do. Di Giannantonio tried his hardest to put Mark in the gravel, effectively, but he made the move down the second time. Again, aggressive, but fine. There was a bit with Márquez and also Bastianini where Mark, proving my point, he didn't want to race him, but Bastianini went down the inside of Márquez, a good lunge at turn 1, and they went round late on the circuit, he went to the last sector. And Bastianini, a few times the lap when he got ahead of Mark, he would run wide, and he ran wide in this left-hander. Now, we went to the right-hander where the Aprilia boys nearly touched the day before, and because Bastianini was wide on the entry of the left before, he then ultimately already messed up his entry for the following right-hander, which means Mark down the undercut, bung, back down the inside, and there's a point where it's a long corner, and they're going to meet at the same point in tarmac again where the Aprilia boys did yesterday. And you can see with the 8, Mark's got the undercut line now, and he's leaving that gorgeous black mark on the tarmac, getting the rear wheel spinning. And again, he's made Bastianini, they've come to the point, he's made Bastianini beautifully stand the bike up using the rear of his tyre, sliding it round, got back ahead of Bastianini. Bastianini would repass Mark, but it comes to the point where Mark is almost saying to him, I don't want to race, but you're giving me these chances. And if you give him the chance, he will make you stand the bike up. Almost just to prove a point of being like, what are you lot doing? This is almost like your opportunity and you're letting me back in it. It did feel like that was what was happening, and that's why I was kind of chuckling watching it. I think the move Di Giannantonio and Mark was, I wouldn't put the first one as in the racing incident. I say first, there's only one really, because the second one they both stayed on track. The second one was aggressive, but he got it working fine. Mark would have done the exact same thing. I think the first one was a bit more than a racing incident because there was that little bit of contact on the knees which made Mark stand the bike up and go across the chicane. And if you go on F1 terms, Di Giannantonio didn't make the corner either. So I think a long lap was fair. I don't think Digi even complained about it. I think he realised what's going to happen. So Digi did well to do that, come back into 6th or 7th, and then recover to 4th in the end. Again, not on the podium. He couldn't catch the 3 Aprilia boys in front of him. Jorge Martin in 3rd, Fernando 2nd, Ogura 1st. But it's a strong actually drive from Di Giannantonio, considering the Ducatis were not up to their standards. But away from that group, again, the cameras focus on Ogura, Fernandez and Martin in the front. Ogura's move was again down the left hand at the end of the track, where these incidents are happening with Márquez and Bastianini and the Aprilia boys. Ogura has his habit to just pop out late down the inside, and it's beautiful how he does it. He did it in the final chicane. He did it in turn 1 a lot, and he took the lead from Raul Fernandez at the corner, doing the exact same move, popping out late down the inside. It's clean, it was beautiful, it was stunning from Ogura. It shows all the momentum he's been building the last few rounds really came to a climax here, and he got the win he deserved. And I'm glad he got the win he deserved. He really was a front runner now for the championship. Again, only 25 points off, and it's hard to not like Ogura. Ogura he's the quiet, he's almost shy, but put him on a MotoGP bike and he's an animal. And I kind of like those characters. And he's come through the ranks. He was the first rider to win, who competed in Moto 4 to win a MotoGP Grand Prix, then competed in Moto 3, Moto 2, MotoGP. He's also the first Japanese rider to win a Grand Prix in MotoGP since Tamada in 2004. So that's a 22-year stint they've been waiting. And now they have the hero that is Ogura. Which is interesting to focus for next round. I said next round is in Sachsenring, which, again, Márquez's castle, it's Márquez's land. It's all left-handers. I'll be amazed if someone can get near Márquez, because of the nature of his dominance, usually at that circuit. I still think it's a track that suits the Aprilia more. But as I said, maybe Trackhouse, because the factory boys are too busy tripping over themselves. They hate everything in that factory Aprilia team. Hate each other. it's literally how it's working. There's going to be a wall soon in that garage, like the Rossi Lorenzo days. But I think the track suits them more, but then the left-handers suit Marc Márquez. And that's the key thing. And if Márquez obviously is going to be more fit going into it, because it's, time heals that shoulder, and they have that week and a half off now before Sachsenring, I fully expect to see Márquez back round at the front and not 5th and 6th, which way he was in Assen. But before Sachsenring, there's going to be more announcements for the silly season, because it's now kicked off with MotoGP. We said Acosta's confirmed the Ducati. I can't wait for that next year. Probably the biggest dream team right now is Marc Márquez and Pedro Acosta. That's happening. Aprilia, you got Marco Bezzecchi and Pecco Bagnaia. Ogura and Martin haven't been announced at Yamaha yet, but Yamaha has said today, did announce the news that Fabio Quartararo and Alex Rins are both leaving their stable. I think it's stable. One of them. End of this year. Quartararo's rumoured to go Honda. I think Alex Rins is rumoured to not be MotoGP, similar to Morbidelli, Jack Miller, maybe Brad Binder. But I expect another announcement soon. I really hope the Yamaha move works for Ogura. Of course, Japanese rider, Yamaha, them and Honda are the Japanese manufacturers. And I really hope it kickstarts well on Honda on the 850cc. I just don't believe it will. Not on Honda, Yamaha, sorry. I just don't believe it will, because of what Yamaha have shown the last couple of years, which is why Fabio Quartararo is walking away from them. Now, of course, it wasn't just MotoGP going on last week, and there was also the Formula 1 Grand Prix in Austria, and in Formula 1 fashion, there was controversy, as there tends to be when a Formula 1 circus is travelling the world. The takeaway I take from the Formula 1 Grand Prix in Austria is what could have been for Red Bull and Max Verstappen. Now, they've brought a raft of upgrades for this weekend, 7 or 8 of them, I think. And they were competitive in qualifying in the race, more than I thought anyone thought, because on Friday they didn't look particularly good. However, it was a George Russell win, and the George Russell pole, and a Mercedes win, and a double Mercedes podium, but Anthony in 3rd, because Max Verstappen managed to secure 2nd. Now, why, do you ask, did I start this F1 bit by mentioning Verstappen and not the race winner? Because in my opinion, this was the race for Verstappen and Red Bull to get that first win of the season, if you look at the events that happened to them throughout the weekend. The upgrades definitely played a part. Max was fighting for pole in Q3, but then he went into turn 9 actually up on the time. I still think Russell would have got pole, but this is where the controversy comes in. Before I mention the race day, Verstappen went into turn 9, one of the fastest corners, if not the fastest corner on the track. His rear wing, the new rear wing, yes, it's shut after the straight line mode, but because of the delay, and it was only like a 4 or 5 tenths delay to the rear wing shutting, the aerodynamic load had not come back on the car yet. And this, by the way, is fascinating, because this is what people aren't understanding about the aerodynamic load on these Formula 1 cars. I saw a whole thing on social media that, the rear wing shut, so Verstappen just lost it. I think Montoya said he hit the curb, and that shows how much of a fool Montoya is nowadays. But when the rear wing shut, the aerodynamic load, because of the delay, it was not yet working on the rear of the car as Verstappen turned in, and he turned in at full speed. When the load's not there, it's like not having a rear wing at all, and that's effectively what Max felt. Hence the rear went on him at turn 9. He went all the way in the gravel into the wall, and that was him out of qualifying. It was Q3, so I think he qualified around 5th because of this. Antonelli then behind him was also up on his time. Backed off because he saw the car in the wall and he thought double yellow, because it was initially a double yellow. It went single yellow, double yellow, single yellow. Why the world did it go single yellow and then change back to a single yellow? It's quite clear. There's a car in the wall at the fastest part of the circuit. It's a double yellow. It's the stewarding of Formula 1 being very odd. Antonelli backed off because he saw the double yellow, he saw the car. He backed off. George Russell then was the last car, and he approached. And then I think he's exposed the flaw in the yellow flag system in Formula 1 on qualifying. And this is where it's controversial. I, for one, personally don't like the fact he got away with this. Especially you got the GPDA president, who's very on it with safety, playing this little game with the yellow flags, which is not a good look, I think, for the ones who run that organisation. And he is the president, and he's the one saying he didn't see a car or the double yellows, which is true. He didn't see the double. He saw the car. That's absolute Charlie rap that he didn't see the car. But it wasn't double yellow when he approached, and that's the mistake of the FIA and the stewarding, to not do a double yellow. But because you're lifting more, this is what I don't like. This rule that now, because he's lifted slightly and then gone back on full throttle, the lift means he's acknowledged the yellow flag, which is dangerous. It's a dangerous precedent to do to get away with that, because at the part he's gone into the mid corner at turn 9 where Verstappen's in the wall, he's at full speed, and that should not be the case. There's never been the case for yellow flag, but he got away with it. You could also argue the way these cars are and the way they're lifting off more, and they now counterbalancing that yellow flag with I lifted when they're lifting anyway on the lap, and that's part of the lap now, which again is a dangerous precedent to set. I think they'll set the dangerous precedent because they now can't go back on their decision, which means every yellow flag that happens in qualifying now, the drivers are going to show that hint of a lift and back on full throttle and say, I acknowledge the yellow flag. It's like in karting, when there's a yellow flag, you can stay flat, but you put your hand up and say, I saw it. Very, very dangerous precedent. I didn't like it. I didn't like they got away with it. But he came around the corner, and Ferrari is celebrating at this point because they believe it's a 1-2 on the grid. Suddenly George Russell comes by and takes P1, and everyone's surprised because everyone's thinking, is that not a double yellow? Surely that would be cancelled. Turns out, no, it's a single yellow. There's the fault with the stewarding to change it to a single yellow, which in turn is ridiculous anyway. So yes, he abided by what the regulations are. Yes, there's now a loophole in it, and it's been exposed, the yellow flag rule. I don't like the GPDA president, especially playing this yellow flag game. I didn't like the stewarding. I think that's a simple way to say it. I don't think it's a good look for Formula 1 at all. It brought controversy, yes, which is what Formula 1 happens to do. Anyway, he got George Russell pole position and effectively the race win when you look what happened on Sunday. The reason why I mentioned Verstappen before is because I do think if it wasn't for what I believe was a strategy blunder by the Red Bull team, Verstappen would have won. So again, he started in 5th place and he had to come through the cars in front of him to catch the Mercedes in general. And he had a very, very good scrap with Lewis Hamilton. Everyone enjoys watching these two go at it. He was a stun. You don't see lunges that much in Formula 1 anymore, but I love when you do. And it was a stunning lunge down the inside of turn 3 on Hamilton. But because he used the boost, Hamilton came back on exit, undercut him, and they're side by side now going down the back straight. Because Verstappen used his boost, this is where tactics came in, and I called it when I was live commentating. He's got to think of turn 6, not turn 3 or 4. So Hamilton managed to get Verstappen back at turn 4, into turn 4, because they both lock up. Max looks up more, and looks up heavily actually this front right into turn 4. They come out of turn 4. Max is now on the inside of turn 5, so it's going to be the outside of the important turn 6. They're side by side going into it. Of course, Verstappen's going around the outside of Hamilton turn 6. What's Hamilton going to do? He's going to open the steering, because you're going to do that, of course. Verstappen goes wide on the gravel, comes back on. Said he pushed him off, but I think this was good, hard racing. I think it's what racing should be. And anyone on that inside in the Hamilton position would have done the same thing. And it was gorgeous racing. Gorgeous racing. One thing I will mention is they did this. Everyone was praising this drone clip where you're watching the McLaren to attack Antonelli, and you got Verstappen and Leclerc in front fighting. I don't care about the drone. I think it's kind of weird to follow what's happening. I think the normal camera would have been fine, but people like the drone shot because it gets them closer to the cars, so there you go, whoop-de-doo, is what we have. If they do it well, I don't think turn 6, the drone shot was as good as what everyone's making it out to be, but alas. So yes, Verstappen down the inside of Hamilton. They tried again a few laps later after this battle. Verstappen now knows, and I said it in commentary, he now has to know, focus on turn 6 after turn 3, not turn 4, sacrifice turn 4, because he's used the boost. So he comes out of turn 1. I love Austria. You follow him out of turn 1, you go up the hill into turn 3. Verstappen goes down the inside again, a lunge in turn 3, a stunning lunge. Hamilton also saw him. Puts Hamilton wide as Hamilton can't quite get the same undercut coming out of turn 3. But again, as you go into turn 4, down the back straight, go into turn 4, Hamilton gets Verstappen into turn 4. Of course, he's used more boost. Max is now charging his boost. But the reason why Max charged more of his boost down the straight and now sacrificed turn 4 is because on the exit of turn 4, Max is now on the outside of the exit, which means he then has the inside line for turn 6. But this is the genius part, this is the clever part. The inside line in turn 6 meant he can put Hamilton wide at the entry and mid-corner for turn 6, which is exactly what he did, and that's how he got the position. Stunning racing, clever racing, clean, hard racing between two of the greats of the sport. And that makes me feel better about F1 when I watch a race like that. And I liked actually seeing how the drivers are using the tactics and are using the boost between 4 and 6. That a little addition I like. The bit I don't like is I think Anthony made the move on Leclerc into turn 9. I said in the podcast, you won't see actual natural overtakes into turn 9. And you didn't. But there was one where Anthony got Leclerc into turn 9 because he used the boost and Leclerc wasn't. They're the ones I don't like. Show me Verstappen v Hamilton when they're tactically using the boost to focus on another corner. That's the one I do like, and that's where real racing comes in, and I enjoyed it. They tried one scrap, they tried it again, and it was perfect. But you might think, why did I mention a strategy blunder or mistake by Red Bull which cost Verstappen the win? Well, Verstappen, when he was in second, closed the gap to George Russell to under 2 seconds. Now, he had, in the mid part of the race, the mid stint, he had the pace. And it was a race I wanted, because I said I wanted strategy to be in. I want 2-3 stops. Ferrari, I must have done about 7 or 8 stops in the end, because the Ferrari just couldn't hold their tyres at all. They had a nightmare, same as Norris, really. And due to that, they ended up being nowhere. But the ones who could hold their... And due to that, they ended up being nowhere. But the ones who could hold their tyres had to think about strategy, had to think what to do. So Verstappen got the gap down to Russell quite a bit. Russell then pitted. Now, you think Verstappen and Red Bull, they had to respond within 2 laps, I think, to have the chance. For whatever reason, they were really focusing on having a tyre offset for the end of the race. But the end of the stint on Max's hard tyre stint after Russell pitted, you could see his pace dropped off massively the last 3, 4, 5 laps, because that's when the tyre wall really hit him, and he lost the pace. So why Red Bull were focused on the tyre offset, knowing he's not going to pace at the end? Maybe that's why, because they knew he's going to struggle with the tyres at the end of the next stint. But they focused too much on the offset, so they went for a 6-lap tyre offset. So when Verstappen came out the pits for this last stint, he was now 11 seconds behind Russell, compared to where he was got it down from like 9 seconds to 2 seconds before. And now at this point, they've allowed Kimi Antonelli to come back in the fight, because he's come out the pitch 2 seconds behind Verstappen. So now they're both hunting George Russell. And I think overall the 2 fastest drivers were Verstappen and Antonelli. You can't fault Russell in the race. He did what he needed to do. And I think over the line, what was it, 1.5 seconds between Russell and Verstappen, and just half a second between, not even that, between Verstappen and Antonelli. Because it was nervy for the Red Bull and Max the last 2-3 laps, because Antonelli really closed in, got within a second. Max went to stay in front of him. But Max didn't have enough laps to eke into the gap with Russell, because he just didn't have the pace on the tyres. And they asked too much of Verstappen for that last stint. And I think the blunder cost them. I think if they responded to what Mercedes are doing, Max would have had a different approach to his hard tyres on that last stint. And I do think the result would have been differently. However, a second place for Red Bull, a second place for Max, their best finish of the season. It's his second podium of the season. The upgrades clearly worked. They were both quite positive. Only Max was annoyed that he didn't get the win, of course. But both him and Hadjar, I think Hadjar was 6th or 7th in the end, they were both quite positive about the car after the race, saying there's more room for improvement in the car. They can feel it. They just have to dial it in and find it, which they weren't saying before. So there's the positive for Red Bull. But yes, it was George Russell winning the race. He's closed the gap on Antonelli, who was 3rd. Behind him, the guys weren't really near him at all. You had Oscar Piastri put in a strong drive to finish 4th. McLaren had no pace all weekend and were very quiet. And actually, most of the race was quiet. Sainz broke down the start on the home straight, and Max went past him. It's on the radio. He got told double yellow, so Max went, is this where we go flat out? Obviously, it's a joke towards what happened on Saturday. Formula 1 then reposted it, which I found odd, because I don't think they realised Max is laughing at their officiating. But hey-ho, there's what you get. But speaking of strategy, real quick, I do also think Antonelli was kind of let down, because in the middle stint, Mercedes kept Antonelli out a long time, which I think cost him second. If it wasn't for that, he would have got Max for second, because he had to, similar to Max, he had to make the time up in the last stint, because he was kind of in no man's land in the middle stint, and I think he was unfortunate. But of course, the focus more was on Russell holding back Max. I think Anthony was kind of sacrificed for that to happen. He closed the gap to Max. Yes, couldn't overtake him. I think 1 or 2 more laps he probably would have. But similar story of Antonelli, he had the pace to beat Russell. I think he had the pace, to come ahead of Verstappen. Again, I think personally strategy cost them both. And a team I will do a shout out to, I seem to do it every race weekend now, is the RB team, the one of Lindblad and Lawson, who again came home double points. Again, Lawson led Lindblad. There was a bit of a team order thing happening there, which wasn't aired. It's ironic now what radios they don't air on live TV anymore. Like, you didn't hear Verstappen's little jibe at the double yellows. You didn't hear the team orders between the RB teams. Lawson did lead Lindblad home. Lawson's quietly putting in a very strong season that's not hurting his name at all. And in fairness, good on him. He's had a couple rough years in F1 now. And he's really made what I think is that seat his. And there's rumours that it's in danger. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it should be in danger. I think he's doing everything this year that he needs to do. And again, another points finish, he can't do any harm. The ones we're intriguing with Ferrari, I predicted Ferrari would be a little bit better than what they were in Austria because of how Spain went with the tyre management. And they were slaughtered. Ferrari were absolutely slaughtered. Hamilton 3 or 4, so I think it was a 3 stop in the end. But they pitted him in the first on hard tyres, and then after like 11 laps, put him on softs because the hard tyres just had no pace and were already going and graining. Then of course they put him on softs. He was quick on the softs for a bit, but then they went out. Leclerc's having similar difficulties on his tyres, and they ended up being nowhere. Leclerc ended up being done by Hadjar, I think, and Norris. Was it Hadjar and Norris? Yeah, definitely Norris ended up being done by. And they were miles off. And then the Ferraris had a little scrap between themselves. Hamilton, I think, came home in 5th. But it was very disappointing from Ferrari. I expected better from them after Spain, especially the momentum they now had. So it's not the recovery they wanted, not the repeat they wanted from Spain. And it's intriguing how the Ferrari, but this is where it comes in that these cars are so track dependent. How did the Ferrari work so well in Spain with the hot temperatures and hot tyres, and was awful, frankly, on Austria? And I say the hot temperatures because Austria was boiling. I think it was a 35 degree air temp, so it was like a 49 degree track temp or something like that. So the tyres were melting. The Ferrari was not having any of it. And the McLaren weren't having any of it. Apart from Piastri, as I said, managed to recover fourth. It did it quietly, did it on strategy, did it in the pits. It's the first time in a few weekends we've seen Piastri kind of outperform Norris, which is good for Piastri's confidence. He needs to do that. The interesting part to me, I mentioned that Leclerc did in fact get done by Hadjar and Norris. Norris would come home in 7th, Hadjar 6th. Strong drive by Hadjar as well. That's what Red Bull need. The bit for me was Norris in the first half of the race had no pace, similar to Piastri, but suddenly when they put the hard tyres on, Norris's pace was similar. I think it went under the radar. Norris's pace was very similar to the leaders of Verstappen and Russell at the time. But because the damage was done in the early laps, it took McLaren about 30 laps to find that pace. Piastri already made moves early on, whereas Norris was slow as anything early on. So Piastri had that little buffer to fight for 4th. Norris had to fight for 7th at the end, and in the I finished like 2 seconds off Hadjar. But the pace was very good, and it's interesting how it took them that long to wake the McLaren up. When it did wake up, it would have saved its way through, I think, the cars in front. So don't count off McLaren. Yes, they had a bad weekend, but I do think if they can get that car in the right window early on, they're going to be fighting with, well, not fighting with, but they're going to be behind the Mercedes, arguably fighting with Red Bull now. Where are Red Bull going to be going forward? This is the first time they've looked actually competitive, not on luck. Verstappen's pace was there through qualifying and the race day. Now we have to see in Silverstone what's going to happen with that and if the upgrades are working. Remember, Red Bull are dying to keep Verstappen as a Red Bull driver. They're doing everything they can. I said before, this is the weekend where they have to prove they can do that and can prove to Verstappen they can actually be competitive and make the upgrades that are needed. Rumour has it actually, so Verstappen's been rumoured to McLaren, which I'm not against because it's a nice little Senna vibe if he goes McLaren. And the rumour is that was initiated by the Verstappen camp. Russell needed to beat Verstappen in that scrap for any chance of his Mercedes seat next year, but Toto Wolff in his answers after the race specifically pointed how strong Max was. And you can never write Max out, and Max is this, and Max is this. And I'm like, you've mentioned Verstappen more times than you mentioned Russell winning the race, which again is probably going to hack Russell off. So despite the great battles and the weird random overtakes, the problem I have still is these cars just don't entertain me when I'm watching them. There's too many things going on with these cars to think it's natural racing. I enjoyed a lot of the parts of the Austrian Grand Prix, and I didn't enjoy some other ones. I haven't mentioned some teams from the weekend because there's no need. I mentioned Cadillac. No, I might as well mention Aston Martin with nothing at the back. Haas had a bad weekend. Alpine were very quiet as well. They weren't in the top 10. And Audi again missed out on the points. I think it's the 4th race in a row. One of their cars are 11th. That's really enough said about what happened outside the top 10. No one really cared. I still have this nagging feeling that I don't like these cars. There's something. I don't know if that's because I said the random overtakes in turn 9. There was good battles, I said, between the drivers. The McLaren boys coming out of turn 3. I like how when they made the adjustments after Miami, you were seeing the lunges on the brakes now into corners like turn 3. That I enjoy. But there's still something. There's still something about the energy management I don't like. And I say don't like, I hate inside. And it's restricting me to enjoying the races as I should be doing right now. I mentioned before the boost between turn 4 and 6 became important, and I enjoyed that. I like seeing, as I said, how drivers are using the boost coming out to line up the following corner or 2 corners down the road. You saw, as I said, the Verstappen-Hamilton battle. Verstappen realised early on, I blocked the camera with my hand there, sorry. Verstappen realised early on in his first year of Hamilton, he's used his boost to make the move into turn 3 on the brakes. But then, of course, he's left vulnerable down the straight into turn 4. So after you do the move on turn 3, but then focus 15 seconds later for turn 6. And that's where the real move's going to happen. I like that. That's a game of chess at 200 miles an hour. That's Formula 1 strategy racing. I enjoy that. I don't like the boost out of turn 8, which helps people in turn 9 do a random overtake. And the fact that's still happening is, I think, what grinds my gears. If we focus on the championship standings quickly, Anthony still leads. George Russell's moved up to 2nd, Hamilton down to 3rd. Verstappen, nothing else has moved in top. Verstappen stays 7th, but he closed the gap to the McLarens. And Red Bull have broke 100 points now in the constructors, but they're still about 50 points off, 40 points off McLaren itself. So nothing really changed in that regard. However, we are coming into what is now the British Grand Prix this weekend at Silverstone. The Brits love it. If you're a Mansell fan, I remember my dad went to the old races, and I said if you're a Mansell fan, my dad went to the old races when it was Mansell Mania, and he hated it. I kind of picked up that tradition where I love the Silverstone track. Well, I like the old one, it was bridge. I don't like this new farm Abbey. Well, I say Abbey, it was Abbey before, but this farm curve in the arena bit, I don't like that part. Bring back bridge corner, that's what I say. But the British Grand Prix is annoying. But here we are at the British Grand Prix, you can't do anything about it. Now, I think it's a weekend which could be embarrassing for Formula 1. We're going to look at the track as we normally do. We won't do Sachsenring now, because we've got a week break from MotoGP, so we'll do the Sachsenring preview of the track next week. We'll do it for Silverstone, but because of how energy rich this track is going to be, I fear the cars are going to look stupid. on what's a track where it's a fabulous track after turn 6. Turn 6 to turn 18. I've got the track rank in front of me so I can see turn 6 Brooklands into turn 18, which is club. Fabulous track when the cars are on the limit. I don't think the cars can be on the limit. As they come to Márquez and Bezzecchi, they're going to have no energy because of how rich and how much throttle, how much time you spend full throttle on this track. And I fear that this weekend. And I fear that it has this potential to, again, expose the flaw in this engine regulations, which are many flaws, big many flaws in these engine regulations. This might be the track. Tracks like Spa, tracks like Monza are going to be the ones to show, oh, they're just god-awful, and there's nothing we can do about it this year. Hopefully I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm going to be wrong. But in the positive note, let's put ourselves in the driver's shoes coming down a lap of Silverstone. So turn 1 is Abbey. Flat out. Abbey's a great corner. I do like this version of Abbey where it's the right-hander. It's flat out. You won't make a move. Right, okay. I said that at turn 9 Austria. Maybe you will make a move with this boost button. Turn 1 flat. Drivers can ignore it. It's tighter than it looks. But when you're there, it opens up on exits. You can use a bit of the inside curb and use the full exit, which leads straight into turn 2. A long left-hander of farm, also flat. The first time you're on the brakes is turn 3. Into turn 3, 4, and 5, the little arena section. On the brakes of turn 3, you come out of farm, so you're already on the left-hand side. These cars have more than enough downforce to do that. You're braking on the left-hand side of the farm. You're throwing it right to what's effectively a hairpin. 2 hairpins basically coming up. Turn 3 hairpin. You want your front right as close or even on the inside curb as you can. It's not a big curb. It's kind of a flat curb. You put your front right on it. The car will guide round turn 3. What you then do, you swing from turn 3. When you're coming out, you're more towards the left side of the track than you are on the right. And turn 4 comes at you quickly. And now we're going back the other way, left-hander, hairpin. So you come from the left side of the track, swing it all the way right, because you want to open the turn 4 entry as wide as you can in these cars. But your front left on the inside curb, use all the exit curb you can out of turn 4 into turn 5. Turn 5 is like Abbey. It looks tight, but because of how wide you took on the exit at turn 4, you can take it flat easily. No problem. Down the back straight. This is where I fear the energy is already going to drain the cars, down this back straight. Into turn 6 now, into Brooklands. Turn 6 is a trail braking one. This is the one where the track becomes magnificent. You hit the brakes for turn 6. Not that hard, because you have to flow the entry. It's a fast, wide entry. You want to flow with it, and the corner tightens towards the exit of turn 6 as you go from Brooklands into Luffield, turn 7. Because you want to stay as left as you can for Brooklands, turn 6, your entry's already kind of there for you in turn 7. You're staying to the left side, and then you're throwing it right for turn 7 Luffield, and you're keeping your... There's 2 lines, actually, 2 lines. You can either keep your front right along the white line of the entry, and you get like a wider exit into turn 8 Woodcut onto the old start-finish straight, or you can kind of V-line it or do a long, what's effectively a sim racing line, where you sacrifice the inside of Luffield. Not enough where a car goes down the inside of you, but enough where you're that little bit wide. It means you can kind of do the little handbrake. Obviously not handbrake, but if anyone who knows what I mean by that knows, where you kind of rotate the car mid-corner, and it means you can go on the throttle earlier, and you can kind of V-shape it, and you're going faster coming out the corner, but you're sacrificing the entry, if that makes sense. So whatever way you do, you need to be fast. You need a good exit of Luffield. You're going to use all the exit curb of Luffield on the left-hand side to come out onto Woodcut, which again is a flat right-hander. Cars won't even notice it. Onto the old start-finish straight. Yep, so we come out of turn 8 on the old start-finish straight into now what I think is the best. Technically, it's 5 corners. One of the best 5 corners bits on the calendar, and it's where other tracks take inspiration from these corners. Sorry. Copse Corner. What I fear is that I love Copse every year because the cars are on the limit. They turn into turn 9 completely flat. It's a long radius, almost 90-degree right-hander, but it's so long, it's so fast. It's tight on entry and opens up on the apex, which means if you get the entry right, you can bomb it flat out, use all the exit on the left-hand side. Before, you can see the cars are on the limit. They're full speed, they're flat, as I said. The camber, as they turn in right, you see that all the cars, the camber leans left. The left rear tyre really gets a battering at this corner, but it's a perfect corner. And I fear this year they're going to go into Copse harvesting and super clipping because they need the battery. So that I fear the excitement is going to be taken away from Copse. I really hope it's not, because it's one of the best corners on the calendar behind a Rouge. So you come out of Copse. Let's act like the Formula 1 car is on the absolute limit. You come out of Copse. You're on the limit now. You're seeing Márquez and Bezzecchi in front of you. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You take as much far. You're on the right side of the circuit out of Copse now, coming into Márquez turn 10. So you're coming into Márquez turn 10. You're going to put your front left on that inside curb. You can ride it fine no matter what. You're on the limit. Turn 10 flat. You then go right instantly for turn 11. Get your front right just as close as you can to that right hand side curb. Flat. 10 flat. 11 flat. You're now going into turn 12. Sorry, but it comes left. I don't know if this year will be flat at turn 12. Well, I'd say turn 12. I don't know what they're called. It's for the bit in the middle between Márquez and Beckett and Chapel. But turn 12, they're going to be, if it's not flat as an ease off the throttle, they're not going to come down to gear, I don't believe. They're going to be still top gear. but you're now, the car's fully, you've gone from left to right, back to left, the car's fully on the load now on the right hand side, but you want to stick to as much as the inside you can to get the apex for turn 13, which now you come off the throttle, down 1 or 2 gears for 13, but because you want the entry to be tight on 13, you want to build the car up for the exit to go straight on the inside curve for turn 14, which is the left-hander and Chapel. Get 12 and 13 right, your run for Chapel sorted. You can ignore the corner. Get 12 wrong, it affects your 13, it affects Chapel. If you get your Beckett's wrong, it affects Chapel. So you need to be perfect, specifically for Beckett's into Chapel. You come out of Beckett's, you come in full speed now, left-hand side, you're letting the car float wide, you hit the curb for the entry of Chapel, flat onto the main straight, the hanger straight. Again, they used to bomb it down here after pushing to the limit for Magnus and Beckett's. The tyres are screaming at this point. Bomb it down the hanger straight. I fear they're going to be super clipping down here as well, and again, which is what I'm not looking forward to. I hope I'm wrong. Into Stowe corner. Stowe is a rapid corner. You're coming here, or you're used to, at full speed down the hanger straight. You then lean into Stowe. You'll probably take Stowe in 5th gear, maybe 4th gear if to come down a bit for the exit, but you're going to bomb into the air. You're barely on the brakes for Stowe, barely on the brakes. You go down from top gear to 5th gear, let's say. It's a fast entry. It tightens a bit on mid corner, and it opens an exit before cutting back a little bit for the pit entry, which is on your right. You bomb it to the inside. You want to stay tight to the inside lines you can on Stowe, and then use the exit curve which goes down the hill to Val. You've got Stowe now. You've done the parts of the track where you need to be on the limit. You're now looking to Val and Club corner. You've done everything perfect. Now you need to use strategy and brakes. It's not just about having the biggest size of you-know-what to go through this section. You're coming down the hill into Val now. Hit the brakes into Val, 2nd or 3rd gear. I think it's 3rd gear in these cars now. You're on the right-hand side of the circuit. You brake, turn into Val, the left-hander. You want to use that inside curb. Not too much, because I think there's a sausage curb on the inside, so you want to put your front left again on the inside curb. Get that perfect. You can then have the wide-open entry for Club corner 17 and 18. If you mess up the exit of Val when you're wide, you've messed up your entry for Club, you've messed up the whole Club corner, and you run to the main straight. Bear in mind, the finish line is right at the start coming out of Club. You come out of Club, the finish line is about a second later, so you need to get the exit perfect. You've got the entry and exit of Val right, you're on the left hand side of the track, you then throw it all the way right for Club and just let the car guide round. You want to use the outside part, so you kind of ignore, if you got it right, you kind of ignore the inside curve for Club, and you kind of let the car just go around the outside line, follow the track around the outside for Club, bomb it full throttle, turn 18 is like the corner if you've got Club perfectly in the line right, round the last corner, finish line's already there, across the line. That's Silverstone, a fantastic track. I fear it's going to be ruined this weekend by the harvesting and the super clipping. I hope not, because it normally rewards drivers who are on the absolute limit, as Formula 1 used to reward drivers on the absolute limit. Not so much anymore, but let's see what happens. Alas, that will be it for this podcast. It's a long one. I said it'd be a long one. There's a lot of things to talk about, what happened in the races, and some driver moves as well. We'll see what happens with, as you said, the Verstappen camp, with what rumours happen as we approach Silverstone. I will be live for Saturday qualifying and this Sunday main race on our Twitch channel, Apex Webits Pod on Twitch. Make sure you follow and subscribe to that. I'll also be live throughout this week multiple times, probably sim racing on Twitch. Make sure you subscribe to that. We're also live on YouTube, is where this podcast will go, and the race live commentary also goes on YouTube, Apex to Apex Podcast. Make sure you also subscribe to that one. This episode will be out on that YouTube channel, and the audio will be out on Spotify, Apex to Apex Podcast on that. Make sure you follow on that one as well. And finally, we're very active on the Apex to Apex Podcast Instagram and TikTok. Same handle for both of them. Make sure you follow and make sure you get involved in the socials on there. I like to trigger people in certain fan bases now in Formula 1 because I find it funny. I will continue to do so. Make sure you're involved. Make sure you're following. Thank you for listening to this, and I'll see you if you're in the streams this week or for the streams at the weekend. Thank you again. And I'll leave you with the punchline of this podcast, which is the race is just the punctuation.